Hi everyone, welcome back to my philosophy vodcast. Today I'd like to talk about a very general subject that touches on a lot of different academic subjects and therefore a lot of different debates that people have on Facebook or the internet, and it relates to my recent video on some of the issues I have with extreme feminism. But it also relates to debates on evolutionary biology, evolutionary psychology, um, all forms of psychology really, the nature uh, of ourselves, and the relationship basically between human beings and nature itself. And that debate is the nature nurture debate. And this is a debate that's been going on for a long time in philosophy originally, all the way back really to the ancient Greeks. They were talking about, you know, free will. I mean, it comes into the free will debate. You know, how much is really our free will, and how much is determined by our circumstances. Um, and more recently, it's particularly in psychology, criminology, of course. You know, how much can we blame a criminal for their actions? You know, particularly when you often see that people, you know, that criminality is much more common in people who've, you know, got low education, and come from certain backgrounds. You start to think, well, maybe there's more to it than just pure culpability on the part of the person. Um, and you know, this all relates to how much can we say is down to our nature and the influences around us, the natural world, and society, of course, which in a way is outside our control, and you know, our own choices. And you know, it's very, very difficult to unravel this. And unfortunately, in a lot of society, there seems to be this idea that um, you can unravel it, that you can, because of genes, that it's possible to say, well, this is down to genetics, and therefore, if it's not down to genetics, it's either down to society and effects from society, or it's down to perhaps choice from the person themselves, depending on what you believe about free will, of course. And it's definitely not as simple as that. And I think I have personal knowledge of the debate, the nature nurture debate in psychology, because I did about a year's course at university level, and basically it was very clear to me, and I think very clear to many people in the field, that the nature nurture debate is over, and that there isn't a really clear separation between these two domains. Between, you know, in psychology, the influence of your family, your society, your school, your religion, to separate that from the effects of your genes, or your you know, your gender perhaps, or you know, all these things that we're naturally born with, um, is just not possible. And one reason it's not possible is because they feed back into each other so much. The Our natures affect our culture. You know, particularly, let's say, in the feminism debate, the fact that men and women do have different genetics, different hormonal makeups, different reproductive roles, um, does actually affect our culture, and has affected our culture, has affected the way our culture develops, or cultures, obviously, thousands of them. Um, And to think that it hasn't affected culture is very strange, that somehow culture has developed in isolation from nature and from our own human nature is absolutely odd, really. But there seems to be that idea that somehow it's separate. But no, I mean, our cultures, our society has been formed by us, you know, by human beings, and maybe you could say there's been some supernatural influence on it as well, presumably for the good, but basically we are the ones that have created our cultures with and using our natures, using the nature, our physical and our psychological and hormonal, chemical natures to create those societies. So societies come from us. Society is a natural phenomenon. Just like a tree is. It's something that's grown from nature, and in a sense, the very computer I'm using to send this video on is itself a natural item. It's not supernatural, and it's come about through natural processes, as far as we can tell. Though we tend to think of it as being an artificial object, but that definition, that category itself is very debatable, whether there is such a thing as natural things and artificial things. We can talk about things that are much newer in the natural world, much more novel, and obviously, as far as we know, tablets never existed before, 10 years ago. But it's still something that's come about through natural processes, as far as we can tell scientifically. And what's true for high-tech products is just as true for language, for instance, which is the basis of all our cultures. That's how culture develops. That's how tribe becomes civilization. It's basically through language at its base, and language is the ultimate technology that we've developed as human beings. It's the thing that really separates us from most other inhabitants of this planet. Whales and chimps and certain other higher animals do seem to display an understanding of language and have calls and songs and things like that, which, as far as we can tell, probably are language. But vast majority of animals don't seem to have language, and we've certainly, as far as we can tell, taken it to a level that no other animals have. And it's the basis of all our technology and all our culture. But how are we able to even have language? Well, because of the natural form of our bodies. Chimps are actually quite limited in what vocalizations they can make compared to human beings. So somehow we've developed this nature, this aspect of our nature, which has enabled us to be more vocal and able to make many more sounds, and therefore presumably develop complex language and therefore complex cultures. But in a way, this has all come about through our natures. So disentangling these two things, nature and nurture, I think now it's been concluded in psychology, at least, that is not possible. They're both influencing each other. They're both feeding back onto each other. And the big hope for those who thought nature would explain everything, of course, was genes. And as I've talked about in other videos, genes have been a big disappointment on that front, because the genome project was expected to last a very long time, decades, and in the end it was done in 1 decade, I think. And we've actually got less genes than a chimpanzee. So if genes explain the difference, then surely the chimpanzee would be the more advanced animal. Maybe it is, but I don't think most people would agree with that. And genes just simply do not seem to explain the complexity of even how our bodies are created, let alone how our minds function and how our culture functions. Um, and you know, that goes throughout psychology. This this fact that people with identical genes, for instance, such as identical twins, um, can have very different psychological makeups. And even though they've been brought up in the same family and in very much the same way, as far as can be told, um, they can have very different personalities, as we all know. Um, if you know, I've got relatives who are identical twins, and they're, you know, they're really different sometimes. And you know, so the nature nurture debate, I'd just like to make clear that, as far as can be understood by science at the moment, there's no way to disentangle these two things, nature and nurture. Genes certainly aren't getting even close to that. And you know, if there is some explanation, we don't know about it. And as I say, the culture, everything about our culture is in a sense nature as well. And so are families, and so are schools, and so is language. It's all a natural phenomenon. So I think it's a bit of an artificial distinction, nature, nurture, and I heard a very excellent word that someone came up with, and that was nurtural. Everything's nurtural, and that's probably a good word. Maybe we should adopt it, nurtural. Thank you. Bye for now.